I love finding books that I'm embarrassed I haven't read yet. A friend of mine recommended a book recently. He says he reads it once a year and he just gave it to his daughter to read for the first time. And when this friend makes a comment about a book like that, I go buy the book immediately. He's that kind of thinker and reader. And this one turns out to be that good. And I'm embarrassed I've never read it, partly because it's just a little guy. It's by Parker Palmer. It's called Let Your Life Speak. And it's his contribution to the story, or to the journey that we're on, about trying to figure out how to find, he calls it vocation, but it's work that matters. What work were you designed to do? Sometimes we call this calling. I think of it more in the frame of meaning, finding work that matters to my soul, but also to the world around me, work the world actually needs me to do. How do you find that? And when we do, or the degree to which we find that, we tend to find a meaningful life. Not an easy life, a meaningful life. And he makes a point along the way that I think is relatively obvious. It's not a complex point, but what he does that I think is effective is he puts two conversations together and he has them simultaneously. He's talking about the notion that as you go into life and you're trying to figure out and let your life speak to you, that you will run into things along the way that you tried and they didn't go well. They failed. And how the closing of a door is directionality. There is direction in the failure and the closing of doors. Many of us are pursuing the open doors. We want the door to open in front of us. He's making the point that when a door closes, that is really good data. Because there are all kinds of things that you cannot and should not do. You have limits. But he puts that right next to a conversation about you also have extraordinary potential. There is something that you are made to do, maybe a few things, but not everything. He holds these two conversations together at the same time, not making them mutually exclusive, but making them a both and. They are both 100% true. And very often we have these two conversations separately. We will talk about things that are very practical, about restraints and trade-offs and budgets and structure and limits. But when we're dreaming, we want to dream as though there are no limits. I think it's highly effective to hold those two things together, to figure out what are the things that you are so limited by that you should drop them and quit them so that you can find the things that you're extraordinarily good at, made for, you might say. And there might only be 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, but it's not endless. In fact, it's not even a lot. It shows up in one of our little aphorisms where we're trying to get people to think big. We'll say to them that the sky is the limit. We say, think to the sky, but not beyond. See, because there's nothing beyond the sky. It's a vacuum out there. The sky is the limit, and think as big as you can within those limits. But sometimes people will say, I want you to dream as though there are no limits. Or what would you do if you had all the money in the world? And honestly, I don't give a rip what you would do if you had all the money in the world, because you never will. And if your dreams require that, you're in la la land. Because what happens if you have all the money in the world is we will come take it from you, because nobody's allowed to have all the money in the world. I care a lot about what you would do in the face of limits, in the face of hardship. I care a lot about what you will do knowing that there are limits. Parker does a good job of putting these two notions together, that you have extraordinary potential and extraordinary limits. And if you can learn to dream and discover what your life is telling you about those two things simultaneously, you will find all the doors that have closed over time are shunting you down, are honing you in, and it's somewhere over there now. It's not over there. It's not over there. It's not over there. It's over there. And that is a discovery worth making. Seth Godin wrote a little book. It's about this big again. I also recommend it. It's called The Dip. And in The Dip, he makes a very, again, obvious statement. but it's necessary for us to hold on to this idea. And that is this: scarcity creates value. We value what is scarce. You see, but what I value in you is what you have in abundance, but what is scarce in me. That's why I'll come to you for it, because you're better at it. You're faster, you're smarter, you're more creative with that than I am. And so I come to you. I need you to do that really well. That's why I value it. But what I have a hard time doing is valuing the thing I have in abundance, because abundance is inflationary. The thing that I'm so good at that I can do with ease, I don't value at first. And so I go after what I lack. But what we want to do is do the lack is the limits, abundance is the potential. We want to hold those two things together. And when we do that, you get the concept of potency. And potency is when you've subtracted everything out except what you have in abundance. And so Seth Godin says you should quit almost everything. That's one of his main points in the book, The Dip. Quit almost everything. But you'll hear a wisdom statement that says, winners never quit and quitters never win. That's hogwash. Winners quit almost everything, but they don't quit something. You have limits and abundant potential. When you put those two things together and you think big and think small simultaneously, when you think dreams and think practical simultaneously, when you think about open and you think about close simultaneously, when you think about scarcity or lack and abundance, poverty and prosperity, when you put all these things together, as Parker says in this little book, your life will speak. It's amazing the story it tells.